This work is dangerous. What do I mean by that? You know, since we began doing this work as a fraternity, I've seen both incredible changes in men's lives, both for a positive and also for a less positive. The work that we take on is arduous. It is challenging. There's no question that the Exodus is, I would say, the most intense spiritual exercise that I have ever undertaken. And going into my third Exodus now, I feel like I grow in appreciation for just how demanding it is. You know, it's not to say that that's bad. It's part of its beauty. It's part of the purpose. It has to be that hard. That's part of the Exodus. Taking on a great challenge. Something that ultimately you're not going to be able to do on your own. Something ultimately that you will need God to get you through. Something that's going to teach you about your weaknesses. And therein lies an important part of the Exodus process that we need to acknowledge. When we first began this work, I think there was some kind of a concept like we wanted to do this perfectly. Like there was a perfect Exodus. There was some kind of a flawless victory that we were undertaking. We said we were going to do all these things. We took it very seriously. And we went in with the very best of intentions on absolutely having full and total compliance with the program. I don't feel like that is a reasonable expectation at this point, looking back. And I feel like having that expectation can be very self-destructive. This work is dangerous for a couple of reasons. Because it is so intense, it can be done the wrong way, for the wrong reasons. We can get caught up in a couple of very powerful traps. These are the devil's traps that he has laid out for us in the desert. Just as St. Anthony fought in the desert to overcome these traps of the devil, we too must face them. And we remember that, as he said, the only way to overcome those traps is through humility. So let us keep that at the forefront of our mind as we take on this great challenge with zeal and excitement. But we must also remember humility, and that this is not something that we are doing alone. And then if it is, we're doing it wrong. This work is dangerous. Here are the traps. One is our pride. Undertaking a great challenging thing can be incredibly rewarding, and that's good. And when we are on Exodus and we are on program and we are executing at a very high level, it feels good. Here you are, taking on a challenge, rising to the occasion. And so we begin to feel a sense of pride. We begin to feel that we are doing better than someone else, that we are executing on a higher level. And this leads us immediately into a trap. That first trap and that greatest trap of pride that will completely throw us off of the real purpose of this whole Exodus process. Another trap is on the other side, which is the despair, or the sense of guilt or shame that we can feel when we are not executing at a high level. At these times, when we've taken on these challenges and we find them to be truly, perhaps even far more of an ordeal than we had thought, and we find ourselves slipping and falling behind, having a sense that we are losing ground and that we're not achieving the victories that we had hoped to achieve. All the while, we may see around us men who are achieving these victories, and it can be very frustrating. and very demoralizing. And at those times, we again have the traps of the devil who appear and tell us that we are not worthy, that we are not great men of God, that we are not capable of overcoming these challenges, that we were foolish to undertake them in the first place, and that for the very best possible thing that we can do at this point is for us to turn around and go home and give up, go back to slavery, go back to Egypt, go back to bondage, instead of pushing on through the desert. And it's unfortunate, but every year we see men drop out, men who will not just choose to continue through with the Exodus. Now, I understand there are plenty of valid reasons for this. And ultimately, if a man doesn't feel like he's at a place where he can continue, that's his choice. But we have never required any level of perfection. There's never been any conception that there was some bar for having accomplished it. All we require of a man who runs Exodus with us is just that he make it to the finish. He can drag himself over the finish line in whatever form. He can fail as many times as long as he gets back up. Because that, again, therein lies much of what we learn during this process, is how to fail and how to get back up, how to not stay down. You know, we get very frustrated with ourselves when we fall short. It's natural. And I think that men who are driven to excel and to achieve more, who want more from themselves, who know that they're capable of more, are the hardest on themselves. And that's part of what pushes us, what drives us. And ultimately, that's a good thing, so long as we keep it within a healthy balance. Exercises like the Exodus are very hard for a scrupulous individual. They are going to be very challenging for someone who is very hard on themselves, who is very rigid and who is very legalistic in their approach to their spirituality. But what we cannot do is fall victim to a mentality where we are more focused on checking all the boxes and doing all the things for the sake of doing all the things and overlooking the true purpose of why we're actually engaged in this spiritual exercise. And why is that? We are seeking to unify ourselves with God. We are seeking to do a very challenging thing that we know we are perhaps incapable of doing on our own, so that we will get to a point where we truly need to accept Him and His mercy and His grace. We are taking on a challenge that is going to show us where the cracks in our armor are. We're going to find out where our weak points are, where the stress points lie. Where do we go for compensation? What vices do we turn to first? Which are the ones that we have the hardest time avoiding? By the end of the Exodus, you'll know those things very clearly. And you'll be able to put your finger on them and say, okay, that's where I need to continue to fight. I don't promise any man any great freedom or transformation from the Exodus. It may happen. Men have had incredible experiences. I certainly have. But I will not make any kind of a claim that anything is going to happen for anyone else, except for perhaps that. I think I can very safely say that you will, after having run Exodus, you will have a good idea of the things you need to work on the most, of the things that are holding you back. And if you're very real and very honest with yourself, you'll be able to truly see what areas you need to make progress in and how those things are holding you back from making progress in other areas that you're struggling with. I can also assure you that if you spend the time in prayer, you absolutely will have a change in your relationship with your God. That, I feel like, is a very fair thing to say. That is a reasonable thing to expect. If you spend an hour of time in prayer a day, unified with God, focusing on contemplation and reading His Word and unifying yourself with His will, that will change your life. If there was one thing that you could do during this Exodus, it would be that. If you never took a single cold shower, I would say if you just still got that prayer, in that reading, that daily prayer, that daily reading. Get some fasting in there. Sometimes the fasting puts it over the top. But herein lies, I guess, an important thing. When you take on the Exodus, you need to take on what you are capable of doing. And you need to be merciful enough with yourself to not expect yourself to do something that is perhaps not reasonable. Every man comes to the Exodus in a different place. Every man has a different background, a different level of how involved they are in their spirituality, how robust their practice may be in various different regards. Just like you wouldn't expect a man who'd never been to the gym to walk into the gym and squat 400 or 500 pounds, you wouldn't expect a man necessarily to come into a prayer regimen and immediately start praying for an hour who had never prayed before. And so while there are strict and stringent guidelines by which we adhere to directly with the Exodus, there is also the consideration for each individual's person and where they are and how it is that they're approaching their spirituality now. Because a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't always work for everyone. So while there should not be any considerations made to make something easier for a person, at the same time, there may be consideration given to helping someone to begin and then excel towards an ideal, towards a goal. Perhaps you don't start off with an hour of prayer a day. Start off with 5, with 10, with 20, and continue to graduate up towards that, finding ways to work it into your day. And we'll talk about a lot of that stuff. Ultimately, though, we have this incredible opportunity to grow. And the more opportunity you take, the more seriously you take this, the more you put into it, the more time you dedicate, the more you will get out of it. And it is possible to go through the entirety of the Exodus and get very little out of it if you did not really truly engage in the asceticisms and in the practice, in the prayer. Even the cold showers serve a purpose, even if it is just to give us an incredible opportunity on a daily basis to offer some small act of penance and asceticism as an offering for another person. And we're going to talk more about that. So we've got a lot ahead of us, gentlemen. 90 days, I don't know. I'm not sure if that seems like a long time to you now, but it is. It is a long time. And we have a good 3 months in the desert together. There's a lot to learn, and there's a lot to experience. And I hope that this year, on our 3rd expedition out into the desert, we will have the most successful and fruitful time that we have had yet. And I'm looking forward to this adventure with you, gentlemen. So thank you for joining. I look forward to every moment spent with you, and I will continue to share some thoughts in this venue if you like this. Let me know if you have any thoughts or feedback. I don't pretend to have any kind of a professional setup here or anything like that. And the editing will probably be at a minimum. So this is what I got, gentlemen. I'm just talking to you, enjoying a pipe. God bless. I'll talk to you soon.